Welcome to the Emerge Collaborative podcast. I'm Falon.
And I'm Rachel.
Together, we share more than 2 decades of experience working with young adults on college campuses.
So on this podcast, we're engaging the questions we hear in our ministry to better equip those who care for the emerging adults in their lives.
Welcome to Ask Us Anything. On these podcast specials, Rachel and I answer questions that are frequently asked by current and incoming college students. Today's topic is new student orientation. We're going to be talking about the friends you meet, the roommates you'll meet, the information you'll get, saying goodbye to your family, and faith during new student orientation and leading into the next few weeks. We're excited for this conversation. So let's talk a little bit first about social life. People have a lot of questions about social life as they're coming into college, and particularly about the people that they're going to meet at new student orientation. So one of the questions we get from students a lot is, will I actually meet people that I'll stay friends with? Will I meet my forever friends?
Yeah, and it's a really good question because there's such a high anticipation for that moment, right? That moment where you connect with a group of friends or where you like grab dinner and you're like, oh my gosh, these might be my friends for life. And I think there's pressure in that, especially.
There's a lot of pressure.
And I think sometimes, particularly parents that have good experiences at college can talk. And I think it's good, can talk nostalgically about how they met their friends in college and their friends for life, and they were in each other's weddings. And while those stories can be really encouraging, it can also put a lot of pressure on these moments in new student orientation.
Yeah, for sure.
So the answer to this question is maybe, but it's okay either way. I have heard from students that sometimes they will go to an event, and maybe the event is like a shared interest, or maybe it's something that everybody's supposed to go to, but they happen to like meet a group of girls or meet a group of guys, and everybody clicks. And then they start having meals together every single day for the next however many weeks. And then they do become a friend group. Like that does happen. So I don't want to say that it never does. But I think for the majority of students, the first couple weeks of college is kind of a wash when it comes to friendships, because everybody's overwhelmed. Everyone's a little bit frantic, and eventually you'll settle into a rhythm and you'll find your people. But if you don't find them at new student orientation, that's more common. You're with the group that everybody's kind of having that experience.
One analogy I remember using when I was in college was I had a couple friends that I'm still in touch with, but aren't necessarily like best friends of mine. But when we would meet each other's mutual friends, we've known each other since new student orientation, which is kind of like saying we've known each other since kindergarten. And think of social connections from NSO kind of like knowing someone from kindergarten. It may be that is a lifelong friend that you journey together with and grow up with. But also for a lot of us, we're not friends with the people we knew in kindergarten. We may not even remember their names very well. And that doesn't mean those relationships don't matter and don't have their place. But it also means that if they don't stick, that you're not going to have friends ever again or anything like that. You will find people that you connect with deeply, if not at new student orientation, then in college at some point. And if not in college, then at some point in your life. College is not the end of your life or the end all be all of your social experience, and certainly not new student orientation.
Yeah, that's a really great answer. I appreciate that. I think another question that we get a lot is, what if I just don't connect with people at new student orientation at all? What if I feel awkward? What if I'm alone? What if I have to eat by myself? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, that's a really common concern. The first word of encouragement is so many people are feeling that way. In fact, so many people are feeling that way even when they're in groups of people. They're like, man, I'm sitting with this table of people and I'm acting like I'm having a good time, or it seems like we're having a good time, but I'm not feeling a connection at all, or I'm feeling a little awkward, or I feel like I'm putting on a performance. So the first thing is, everyone's feeling awkward and alone at new student orientation, even if they're surrounded by a lot of people. So that's one word of encouragement, just kind of knowing like this is kind of just what comes with the territory, but it's not going to define my entire social life for the next 4 years, is really comforting. On the other hand, I would also encourage some boldness. there is an opportunity at new student orientation where very few, if anyone, knows you. You might have one or two people from your past who are also overlapping with you. Perhaps your parents are still with you for a little bit. But my encouragement would be try out other social personalities or other social characteristics that maybe up to this point in your life you haven't really practiced very often. So if you're someone who just, when you get nervous and you end up talking a lot, I would consider maybe really practicing listening super well and being a really great question asker during new student orientation. On the flip side of that, if you're someone who tends to be really introverted, you do not need to feel like you have to put on a really peppy, extroverted, outgoing performance if that's not who you are. At the same time, I would encourage you to step a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Everyone is new. Everyone is figuring it out. So feel free to sit next to someone and say, is this seat taken? And strike up a conversation. You never know. It might be a flop. You might never talk to each other again. You might exchange numbers and never talk to each other again. Or it might develop into a friendship. You might run into them later on campus and it's a point of connection. Really good advice that I got from someone when I was going into new student orientation when I was a student was just smile and say hello to everyone you make eye contact with. And that is such a meaningful way to connect with other people and help other people feel seen in a moment that they're feeling really awkward and alone as well. And it can also just help you embody some confidence in a space where you might feel uncomfortable, which is totally understandable. Everyone else who's going through the new student orientation process is also feeling that way.
Yeah, that's so good. I'd love to also inject this conversation with a few practicals as well. So one thing that you can do, and this is going to make it feel worse temporarily, but I promise it will help in the long run. When you're feeling alone or awkward, don't pull your phone out.
Yes. Oh, that's so good.
It makes you unapproachable. It makes it look like you're busy and doing something. And in reality, all you're doing is just trying to pacify your own feelings of discomfort. And so keep it in your bag, keep it in your pocket, be willing to sit and look around. And if no one comes over, to be okay with that for a little bit. But we need to practice sitting in our discomfort without pulling out our phones. So that's one thing. Another thing is new student orientations tend to have a lot of different events all packed into usually 2 or 3 days. So as you're going to different events, try to find somebody who's sitting by themselves, maybe in a theater, or in a classroom, and just to sit down next to them and ask them where they're from. Have a few questions at the ready that you know that you'll ask anybody that you encounter. Maybe it's just like, hey, I'm so-and-so, where are you from? And then they tell you, and then you ask them if they know what they want to study, what their major is going to be, and what dorm they're in, and how their day's been going so far. Whatever it is, if you have it in your head what you're going to do, it kind of helps you push past the moment of like, okay, well, I sat down next to somebody in the cafeteria or at one of those events that they keep shuffling you to, and then now what?
Yeah.
So if you commit to some intentional practices ahead of time, it'll make you feel less awkward in the moment.
Another couple really good questions that are good to have in your back pocket is, what has been the experience so far that has been the most meaningful or exciting to you? How did you end up at this college or university? And at new student orientation, so often, everyone's expected to be excited and happy all the time. And so another really good question that I often like to ask at new student orientations, both when I was a student and as a staff member, has been, what is something this week that has been really overwhelming for you? Or are there any concerns that you've had? And if you're a student, you can say things like, yeah, I'm actually really nervous. And just open that door, and you don't even necessarily need to ask them or put them on the spot, but just say I'm feeling nervous right now. I'm really excited, but I'm also really nervous, and it's hard to connect with people. Or just be honest about whatever those feelings are that are difficult too, because a lot of people are feeling that way and feel like they can't express them because they have to be just exclusively really excited and really happy about this new stage of life.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I really think that fostering conversations like that where you can both be really excited but also be really honest is going to make a connection with people that they're going to remember. Yeah. And you want to be a little memorable so you don't get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, totally. I think that's good stuff.
So one of the other things that happens at new student orientation is not necessarily meeting a bunch of strangers, but it's meeting your roommate for the first time.
Roommates.
Roommates. So a lot of students have asked us, how do I make a good first impression for my roommates?
Oh, that's such a good question. So there's a lot of practical tips that I think we can give in response to this question, but here's a posture to have. I think oftentimes people enter into their space that they're going to be living in with their roommate, or in some cases, multiple roommates. And their first instinct is like, how do I claim my territory in this space? How do I get the best bed? Which bed is the best? And which one can I take over? Like, which closet is slightly bigger? I would encourage you to enter into your relationship with your roommate as a partner and as someone who is seeking their best interest. And that is really going to set a tone of companionability and generosity and kindness and compassion and mutual respect, as opposed to you're an adversary that I need to like battle with, and this is our battleground. And that can be done. That isn't always like hostile, but it can be done in lots of ways that are indirect or more subtle or that kind of thing as well. Yeah, that would be my suggestion for a posture, is like enter into that space with an attitude of mutuality, mutual consideration, mutual respect. Of course, you can only control yourself, which is a significant factor to that, but it does really help set the tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. I did the opposite of that when I got to college, and I very distinctly remember this. I was waiting in line to check in at the dorm front desk, and I knew who my roommate was just from online social media. And so I saw her standing 7 or 8 people behind me in the check-in line. And I remember thinking, I did it. I'm going to get there first. And I grabbed my keys. I grabbed like 2 or 3 things from my parents' car, and I went straight for the elevator, got into the room, and like threw them on the bed by the window, and then just left the room. That was a terrible move because she got up there, clearly saw what had happened, and then had to do the bed that wasn't as good. And I wasn't up there to help her negotiate the space. So when I got back, she was like, hey, I really want to move the beds around. And it just created tension immediately. And of course, I was fine with the rearrangement, but I had communicated otherwise just by my quick, let me snag the good bed action.
That's a
so
great story.
Little things like that actually do matter.
Yeah, they really do matter. Most universities have facilitated spaces by the people, either the students or the staff members who oversee a dorm. They have facilitated times for setting clear boundaries, for communicating about cleanliness, for community standards and rules. But if they don't have that, or if they only do the logistical rules, like whether or not alcohol is allowed in the room or something like that, but they don't do some of the softer skills, like how do I communicate when the room is super messy and I can't function like this? Those are the kinds of things to talk about with your roommate before you get into habits. So asking them about what level of cleanliness is ideal for them and how they feel when the level of cleanliness is in disorder. Some people really prefer to have a neater space, but it doesn't bother them that much if their roommate's side of the room is super chaotic. Other people, like if they're in a chaotic space, they can't think. And that's just good to know, just to be a kind and loving neighbor to your roommate, because that is a really close neighbor. So you want to be a really good one.
Yes. I guess on the flip side, another question that we get is, what if my roommate isn't very kind?
Yeah, that happens more often than you'd think. Not to scare you if you haven't gotten in or if you haven't selected your roommate or didn't get a chance to. So first of all, I would say there are all different kinds of good and bad roommates. A good roommate can be all different kinds of personalities, all different kinds of cleanliness levels, very different characteristics. And that's true for a bad roommate too. So it's hard to answer that question when it depends on what kind of bad, right? So there are different kinds of bad roommates. If your roommate is just cold and distant, that is okay. It is okay to not be best friends with your roommate. I had 2 experiences of that. One of them, she just wasn't in the dorm very often. When she was around, she was very nice and we had a pleasant relatively warm interaction, but she just like wasn't around very often. I didn't see her a lot. She spent a lot of time at her family's house, and so she just didn't live in our dorm very much. And that was fine. Like, it's okay to have a roommate that's like not obsessed with you,
right?
With being friends with you. And then I had another roommate that we didn't have a hostile relationship, but I could tell she didn't particularly like me. I don't think she disliked me, but I don't think she liked me either. And that was fine. She was a respectful enough roommate. When we had issues, it was just kind of like, hey, this is going on. And then, you know, we would battle it out. I remember one instance in particular, I did something that really upset her. And I rectified it, but I also didn't have the added baggage of being like, did I damage this friendship?
Right.
You know? And so I rectified it because you don't want anyone to like take revenge.
Right.
Not that anyone should be, but
not when you're sleeping in the same room as them. Yes.
Right. But you also don't, there are actually some perks to having a roommate that you're not necessarily super close to. But there are other kinds of bad roommates that are actively hostile. Obviously, you want to get a staff member involved in that, especially if there's any time when you feel unsafe. And I don't just mean physically unsafe, though that does occasionally, rarely, but occasionally happen when someone feels physically unsafe in the room with someone. But also if it's just taking a mental or emotional toll on you. Like if you are spending an inordinate amount of time thinking about your roommate and your relationship with them and what they think about you and how they treat you, that is probably a sign for you to get someone else involved. And housing staff is there for that exact reason. So they go by different names and different titles at different universities, but any staff member, for example, a resident director or a resident advisor or a community director, they go by different names. Contacting that person, either a student that's in charge and that's older and overseeing it, or in some cases, if it's severe enough, you can go straight to a staff member and articulate an issue, and they'll either help mediate and rectify the problem. It could just be a simple miscommunication, like if someone threw their things on the bed and they felt pretty hostile about that from early on in the relationship.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, they might actually help facilitate a room change where you can be in a healthier situation. But there are other types of bad roommates too. What if your roommate is just super messy and you like can barely get to your bed because there's just stuff everywhere? Or what if your roommate is doing something that you feel uncomfortable with in the room, having people of the opposite sex over, or doing drugs or drinking alcohol in the room, whether that's against community policy or the actual rules of the dorm or not? What do you do in those cases when it's not necessarily safety, but it's more like personality clashes or values clashes?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for messiness, that's a really good distinction to make of a situation where you try to work it out between the two of you. But that would be a time, if that doesn't happen, to maybe get an older student involved. Typically, that's called an RA. That wouldn't be a situation where I would say, oh, go to a staff member, right? Because you're not, there's not true harm being caused. But it's an opportunity to have honest dialogue with your roommate first and foremost. I think that when it comes to messiness, particularly if it's so severe that you're struggling to like find your things or get to your bed, typically dorm rooms do have half of a room that's for one person and half for the other. And while that's not an ideal way to live your life, it is reasonable to ask your roommate to keep their clutter on their side of the room.
Yeah.
And so that's just a super easy, like, start there kind of thing. If it continues to be an issue, you can ask questions like, is there a way that I can remind you to keep the room clean? Or asking something like, is there a way that I can help you as you seek to live with somebody like me who's a little bit cleaner? Like, I think there are ways to ask the question that don't necessarily accuse, but that do communicate, this is just not tenable for me. So opening up dialogue, minimally asking for their stuff to stay on their side of the room. But then if you need to, that would be probably a good time to bring an RA in for mediation.
Yeah, that's wise.
When it comes to doing things in the room that makes you uncomfortable, whether that's drinking or that's having someone over from the opposite sex, that is another opportunity to communicate clear boundaries. So first and foremost, and that makes us uncomfortable sometimes, to be clear and honest and say, this is making me uncomfortable can be challenging. But I think if your roommate has not given you reason to be fearful of having that conversation, then give them the benefit of the doubt that they'll receive it well. When I was in college, my first roommate had a boyfriend who lived back in her hometown, and her hometown was about an hour away. And there was a time in the fall when she asked if he could spend the night, and I said no. It made me uncomfortable. I didn't know him. And quite frankly, I do think that particularly for overnight stays, there is a safety issue when you don't know somebody and they're spending the night and you're in proximity to them while you're asleep.
That's true for any overnight guest, not just
opposite genders. Yeah, I just don't think it's a good idea, but that's just a personal opinion getting thrown into the podcast.
Yeah.
But I said I wasn't comfortable, and I could tell she was frustrated at first, but she had a friend from high school that lived down the hall. And she went and talked to her friend about it, and I could tell that they were both frustrated. But then she came back really smiley and said, we figured it out. We're going to sleep in her room because her roommate's gone this weekend. And I was like, I'm so glad you worked that out. Thank you for having that conversation. And it was okay.
Yeah.
Later on that year, over Valentine's Day weekend, she approached me again and said, it's Valentine's Day weekend. He just told me he's coming up and I'm having a hard time finding an arrangement for him that would make sense for all of us. And I said, you know what? I bet I can find somewhere else to stay for the weekend. And I generously stayed off campus. And so I think there are ways to work it out in situations like that.
And all that's a really good reminder that, especially with roommates, I think it's true for all of our social interactions when we're in college, but particularly navigating how we live with another person in proximity who we aren't related to, which for most of us, this going to college is the first time that is a thing, whether it's sharing the same bedroom with them or just sharing common areas like living rooms or kitchen spaces. Those are all really good opportunities to just practice adult social skills. You'll take those skills with you into your marriage if you ever decide to get married, or even your social skills in communicating with your families back home. Those are all really good practice. And I know it feels so overwhelming and scary and the well-being of my social life or the well-being of whether my room feels like a place I want to be in hinges on how well this conversation goes. I totally understand those feelings, and you are living there for a significant amount of time. But most people are only living in a room for a maximum of 9 months when they're in college. And besides physical unsafety, you can handle most things for that amount of time. And it is a really good time to practice resilience, to explore your boundaries, to explore what you value the most, to explore what is just habit and what is something that your family values versus something that you just prefer. It's a really good time to explore that. And sometimes you have to live through it to know. So think of it as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to explore. And if those conversations go poorly, those are learning experiences too.
That's great. That's really, really good advice.
I think we should move on to our next topic, which is the inundation of information that people get during new student orientation. And that goes for both parents and students. It is very overwhelming. So one question that we often get from incoming college students or students who have already arrived at new student orientation is, should I try to get to every event, or should I try to give myself a break?
Yes, that's a really great question, particularly because what tends to happen during new student orientation is you arrive, you unpack all of your things, which is really emotional, and then they hand you a schedule that is the length of a novel, and it has every possible session that you can attend. And sometimes parents get their own schedule that they're handed too, where some of the sessions overlap and some of them don't. And suddenly you have all of this information, even just in the schedule, to parse through and figure out where you're supposed to be. You don't know where anything is on campus, then you have to figure out where to go. It's really overwhelming. So it's reasonable to look at a list like that and say, am I truly supposed to go to all of this? And the answer is no. Some colleges will tell you that you should, and it's your job to parse out what the most important events are and what are more suggestions. Sometimes they'll tell you that and sometimes they won't. So what I would say is anything that has to do with your academics, like course registration or a gathering of people in your major, needs to be a priority. Anything that is particular to your residential life situation, to anything health related, like if you need to clear a health hold on your account, anything that would prevent you from starting classes on Monday, don't skip it. But
super important.
Yeah, super important because you're at college to go to school. So make sure you go to that stuff. There are other things that are going to be beneficial for you to go to. And then there are some things that are more social, optional, that you can pick and choose. I would say don't do the bare minimum. Don't just go to the stuff for your academics, but don't do every single thing because you will be exhausted.
Yeah. And it really depends on your personality too. Something that I find helpful to tell students who are going through new student orientation is to look at the schedule and think through like building in time to eat, building in time to spend time with your parents in this new hometown that they're dropping you off at, and who knows when they'll be back, to build in time for rest, whether that's certainly sleep at night, but also rest during the day, just like taking a breather and enjoying this moment where you are. But it really depends on personality and the schedule that your particular university has. So there's no universal correct answer about how much you can or should go to. I think the guideline that Rachel just shared of don't do the bare minimum, but also don't do everything is a really good one. Find some happy medium. And if you're finding yourself going to every single thing and you're exhausted, maybe look into why. Like, is it fear of missing out? Is there some anxiety going on there? Perhaps it's just like a lot of excitement. And if you really are like, yeah, I have the energy for this and this is great, and, I'll sleep when it's over, which by the way is when classes start, so probably not. You might want to, but also like don't be afraid of missing out on everything. Or don't go to something just because you're like, well, what if I was meant to meet my best friend there or something like that.
Your best friend will also be in your classes. Yes, I promise.
There will be other opportunities. So yeah, don't feel like you have to go to everything. I think it's a good guideline.
Yeah. I would also say too that when I think about the different activities that are offered at new student orientation, especially the ones that are more social, they're kind of meant to be take it or leave it. And so you don't really need to feel the pressure of, if I didn't go to the ice cream social, then I was bad at orientation. That's not how that works. Yeah, save your attendance for classes for sure.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think another really good question that we get often is, as they're getting inundated with information, even just from the stuff that's really high priority, health holds, course registration, athletic requirements, community standards in your residence life, even just those required things, those really necessary things to know, can feel like a lot of information. And then on top of that, students are also learning about the nuances of their major, and they're learning where everything is, and they're learning what clubs there are available, and they're trying to figure out where to fall in a social life. And should I rush or should I not rush? Should I try to study abroad or should I not study abroad? They're trying to figure out all these things. So how does a student figure out what they should absorb versus what they should be like, okay, that seems important, but I'm just going to return to that information later and absorb it when I have more capacity?
Yeah, great question. Any piece of information that can be easily found on a website, you don't need to remember it because it exists.
Great advice.
Thank you. Any piece of information that is given to you by somebody that you have easy access to, you don't need to remember. If it's something that you can go ask your RA about again, then great. You can go ask your RA about it again. If it's information that's being given to you that is pertinent to your next few weeks, that you don't think you'd be able to find really easily, either by asking somebody or by going online to find it, and if it's something that you can tell is important for you to complete, or there's some sort of actionable item, then those are the things that you really need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Overall, though, I would say even if you forget something that's super important, or if you just completely space out because you're super tired in some sort of informational session, you'll be able to find the information.
There will be more other people to ask.
Yes.
All of the people who are giving you the information work at the university
that you live at.
So they're around.
They're around. So yeah, I would say like definitely pay attention. I'm not telling you not to, but err on the side of giving yourself some grace because this is so much information and you will be able to find it again.
So as we're talking about all of this stuff of trying to figure out which events to go to in the schedule during new student orientation, which information to prioritize, I hear from students a lot this question of trying to figure out how do I be true to myself and what I know I can handle, what I like, while also trying to step out of my bubble and try new things. They ask a lot what our recommendations are for balancing that, particularly during new student orientation, but also into the first few weeks and even months of the school year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of schools have at new student orientation is they'll typically set up a ton of booths and you can kind of walk around and you can learn all about the different clubs and activities and intramural sports and all this stuff that you can do on campus. If they don't have it during new student orientation, it'll probably happen within the first few weeks. And you will likely be inundated with offers to join clubs, to join sororities or fraternities, to go on this trip. Like there's always things to do on a college campus. And so what I would say is don't do nothing and don't do everything. Doing nothing means you aren't putting yourself out there. It's going to be hard to make friends, and only focusing on academics is going to be really hard emotionally. But trying to sign up for everything will likely mean that about a month into the semester, you actually won't have many friends in the same way that you wouldn't if you did nothing, because you're trying to do too much and everyone else is starting to fit in to where they connect and you're the one that's trying to do everything. So what I would say is find a middle ground, pick some things to try, and do some things that you know you like. Like if you played on your high school soccer team and you're not doing collegiate level sports, but there's an intramural soccer team that you would love to join, then do that. You know that you like it. You know that you'll connect with people over it. But then also pick a couple of things that are kind of outside your comfort zone or that you wish that you would have tried in high school but didn't, or that caught your eye and you're just like, wow, I kind of want to learn more about that. And you never know. You might really like it and you might make friends. So definitely lean into what you're comfortable with because you will probably find your people there, but stretch yourself a little bit and try some new things.
And I would say be attentive to how you're feeling over the course of new student orientation and over the course of the first few weeks and months of the school year. It can't, and this is another reason why it's really important to build a rest, even just into your new student orientation schedule time to like think, reflect, process how you're feeling about things, because you might swing too far one way or the other. You might feel like, I'm feeling a little bored. I feel like I'm not connecting. I feel like I'm not stretching myself enough. And this is what college is for. And so get involved in more things, try out more things, attend more things, whatever that might be. Or, and this is more common, you will find that you're feeling really overwhelmed, really high strung, really anxious, feeling that you're just going from thing to thing to thing. And that's a good indicator that you need to cut back on some stuff. And that's true for the entirety of your academic career, not just for new student orientation, but you can start to explore that during new student orientation and in those first few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So new student orientation, you're going to go through several days usually of tons of information and activities and opportunities. What happens when it comes time to say goodbye to your family? We've had a lot of students come to us and ask us, even in the midst of orientation, how do I say goodbye to my family? Like, what do I do? And to be fair, this has never happened before to students. Totally. And this is uncharted territory. So,
and we actually get this question from parents as well. Parents are also wondering, how do I leave my kid well? Do I cry to show them that they mean the world to me and that I love them and that I'll miss them? Or do I need to stay strong for them because I don't want them to feel guilty because I'm crying, or I don't want them to feel like I regret that they're leaving or something like that? Parents often wonder, like, when do I leave? Some schools have a very clear, like, this is the time and day when parents are going, and some schools don't. Some schools, it's a little more open-ended, and parents are kind of wondering, like, when do I leave? Do I just move in my kid and say, see you later? Do I stay to the very end until the day before classes start? So, and those are all really good questions. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a universal answer, but I do think we have a few tips.
So let's talk about the students first. If a student were to ask, how do I say goodbye to my family well? What would you say to that student?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are ways to say bye poorly, but I think a few good things to keep in mind to say goodbye well. The first is to obviously express gratitude, and that doesn't need to be thank you for everything ever. It can just be thank you for helping me with move-in this weekend. Thank you for the ways that you gave me advice or supported me or encouraged me over the course of this week as we have come to this place. The second thing would be to assure them that you'll be in communication with them and to specify how. Say, I'll call you tomorrow. I will text you this weekend. I will make sure, let's schedule a FaceTime for next week. Something very solid of how you will be reaching out to them and communicating with them in order to update them on how things are going. And that can vary from anywhere to later that night all the way to a week from now or something like that, in order to stay in touch. But to be communicative about how you're going to be communicative. And then the third thing is to say, I can't wait to see you until blank. And the third thing would be to say, I look forward to seeing you at blank, whenever it is the next time that you intend to see them. Even if that's all the way to Christmas break, or if your birthday weekend is just a few weeks into school and you're planning on coming home, whatever that is, say the time that you're looking forward to seeing them again so that you're looking forward to the future and that they know that you're excited to see them and you're thinking about that time, but also that you're communicating a boundary of that is the next time you will be seeing them.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. That keeps it manageable and also clear for the student and the parent.
So those are some helpful tips for students. Of course, other details will depend on your personality, on your family dynamics, all kinds of things. But those are a few helpful things to keep in mind. How about parents? What would you say to a parent who came to you and said, how do I say goodbye well to my kid?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Falon mentioned this earlier, but some colleges will have a very specific time when they say, okay, parents, it's time to leave. But other colleges won't. And so if you're at a college where they give you a really clear time when it's time to say goodbye, or there's some sort of ending moment of the orientation experience for parents, lean into that. That is the boundary that the school is setting up. And so I do not encourage you to stay beyond that. Also, try not to leave before that, because you want your student to be able to participate in whatever that is with you. So if there is some sort of cutoff that the school gives and there's something to mark that moment, definitely try to have that be your moment. If the college doesn't have something like that, then what you're going to want to look at in the schedule is, when do the sessions for parents end and what's happening for students after that? So if the sessions for parents end and immediately after that your student is going to be whisked away to some sort of activity, then it might be worthwhile to spend the night locally and see them for breakfast and then head out. Or on the other hand, if the schedule for parents ends and there's some time to maybe go to dinner with your student after that, then that would be a good time for you to leave. So definitely make sure to stay for the parent part of the orientation if the college has that. And then once you've done that, find an appropriate time to have some sort of meal or some sort of moment to mark the end, and then head out. So definitely don't stay too long, but don't cut it so short that your student doesn't think that you care about the orientation experience.
And before you have that meal or before you have that time of goodbye, have a plan in mind to make that time intentional. And what specifically that looks like will vary dramatically from person to person, parent to parent, family to family. What makes sense for your family context will be different. So maybe you're a family that would want to circle up and pray together. And if so, make sure you have a space where you can do that privately. Perhaps you're someone who loves to write, and so maybe writing a handwritten letter to give to your student to read later, to read the first night that they're alone at their new college. Maybe that's something that would be really meaningful. Or have a few brief words, not anything overwhelming, but just a few brief words of pride, of gratitude, of love to say to your student as you're leaving, and marking this moment where they are going to be practicing being an adult living on their own.
And I think wrapped into whatever that intentional time looks like for your family is this question of how much emotion should I show?
Yeah.
And I think that's really similar to planning something that makes sense for your family. The amount of emotion you show needs to make sense for your family.
Yeah.
So if you're a family that hardly ever cries and doesn't show a ton of emotion, it might be really weird if you decided to just completely
lose it,
bury your soul, whatever. But if you're a family that shares emotions regularly, then it would be weird to not do that.
Yeah.
So I would say do what you normally do and let that be okay. Mm-hmm. One of the things you want to avoid is trying so hard to not show that you're emotional for the sake of your student, because that's not actually doing what you think it's doing.
Yeah.
You're trying to protect your student from the emotions that you're experiencing, and it usually comes from a good place. I don't want them to feel burdened with my sadness, or I don't want them to feel like this is a sad moment, because it's not. It's a happy moment. But what that inadvertently does is it sometimes communicates to the student that you actually are fine with all of this and you don't really care that much. And so you don't need to shy away even from crying a little bit when you're saying goodbye if that's normal for you, because it communicates to the student that you care.
Yeah, that's so good. That's all really good advice. Thank you for that. So let's talk a little bit specifically about what it looks like to practice our Christian faith, particularly during new student orientation, in order to set the tone for the rest of the semester or quarter or the rest of the school year, or even in your entirety of your college career. So one question we get from a lot of students is, are there Christian groups at my university that I should be looking for during orientation week? And if so, what should I be looking for in that community, and how do I get involved?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So typically college campuses have two types of religious groups that you see when you're looking at clubs and activities and things like that. One category of them we'll call, for this podcast sake, campus religious groups. They're off-campus organizations that come onto college campuses to serve college students. So these are organizations like InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, Cru, Young Life. So these groups come onto campus. There's usually a staff member that works for the campus religious group that is just on your campus and is assigned to that campus or that region that you would interact with. So that's one type. The other type of Christian group is university funded or university sponsored. So if you're on a Christian campus, there are likely a lot of those groups. Some of them might be student led, some of them might be staff led, some of them might be like Bible studies, some of them might be service opportunities. You'll see a ton of them. If you're on a college campus that has religious heritage, but maybe isn't super overtly Christian now, you may still have opportunities for that. There may be a chaplain's office, or there may be opportunities to connect with that college's faith heritage through a club or something like that. So those are the two main categories: campus religious groups that are outside organizations, and campus sponsored or campus led groups. Now, what you should look for in a Christian group is dependent on what kind of connection you would like to make. Campus religious groups tend to give students a high school youth group experience, meaning students will attend the specific group, get really plugged in and connected. There's a ton of resourcing to do that very, very quickly. And they will typically have worship experiences, Bible studies that feel really similar to a youth group experience. Sometimes that can be really comforting for students, but oftentimes we encourage students to try to stay away from something that emulates your youth group, because it's going to keep you in that stage of faith in your high school experience. And we want to encourage you to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and also try new ways to experience your faith. So it'll look different for every student, but the one thing I would encourage students not to do is to find something that looks just like their youth group.
And if you do find something that looks just like your youth group and you feel comforted by that familiarity, just balance it out with other opportunities. So stretch yourself by participating in something maybe you haven't done before. Maybe you haven't practiced a lot of worship as service. So get involved in service. Or maybe your university has a lot of opportunities to engage faith in a variety of ways. So at one college, there might be a group that does really evangelical worship, and then another group that does a cappella worship, or another group that does gospel worship from traditionally Black churches. So stretch yourself by getting involved in other types of faith communities that maybe don't look familiar to you or maybe don't mirror your high school experience. And that will help you stretch even as you feel comforted by the community and the resourcing and the familiarity of something that looks a lot like your youth group experience. So it's not to say never get involved in anything like that, but if you do, also try to stretch your faith and stretch your spiritual life in a new way as well.
There's also the question of church. How do I find a church? How do I get involved with a church? And students have sometimes asked us, is new student orientation too early to try to find a church? And what should that look like?
Yeah, it varies a lot depending on your campus's culture. On a college campus that really values the outward expression of the Christian faith, there might be a lot of resourcing during new student orientation to get involved in a church community really early on. So there might be lists that are available to you through Spiritual Life Office, or there might be churches that are tabling during your new student orientation experience where you can actually meet staff or members from that church. Or there might just be a few churches that are really popular on campus that a lot of students go to, and so you hear a lot of buzz about them. The first weekend that you're on your college's campus isn't necessarily a bad time to go try out a new church. That can be a really great time to do it. You might also be really exhausted, and it might be okay to just take a break for that first weekend that you don't have anything going on. God is okay with that. It is okay if you want to do that. But we do encourage students as soon as possible to find a church home. And that doesn't mean settling at the first church that you attend that you kind of like or that you know people at. If you know what you value, if you know what you're looking for in a church, for sure start with those communities. But also we encourage students to use college as an opportunity to explore denominations, heritages, traditions that they otherwise haven't been exposed to. Different denominations are going to expose you to different questions about God and the Bible and the Spirit and Jesus. They're going to emphasize different practices and different theologies. And it's a really beautiful opportunity to experience God in new ways and get to know a diversity of Christians from a variety of different backgrounds. So it is okay to church hop for a little while when you first get to college, but we do highly encourage eventually within the first quarter or the first semester, finding a church that you commit to, that you regularly attend, where you know at least one or two or three people or couples or families that you can connect with and have intergenerational community with, and particularly to have a pastor or a minister to ask questions as you go through spiritual struggle over the course of your college career.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Thank you so much for that. Well, Falon, I feel like I've been through new student orientation over the course of this last podcast. We've talked about social life and roommates. We've talked about information overload and what it looks like to say goodbye to family. And then, of course, how to explore opportunities connected to your faith on campus. So thank you for all of the wisdom and all of the conversation around these topics.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for joining us for this special Ask Us Anything podcast episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation about new student orientation. We talked about a lot of different facets of the new student orientation experience, but if you have other questions about new student orientation, feel free to reach out to us.
We're always excited to continue the conversation.